So, welcome everyone, and I am so excited today to be with Dufflyn Lammers. Welcome, Dufflyn.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be with you, Michelle.
And what we're going to do today is we are going to tell you about the number one thing to never do when you're dating in recovery. And I'm so excited about this because I know it's something you're incredibly passionate about, and I just know it's going to be so useful to so many women out there.
Yeah, I hope so. I believe so. It's important.
So before we get to that, though, what do we mean by dating in recovery? You know, who's this video going to be really useful for?
Yeah, as a relationship and recovery coach, I work with a lot of women who are seeking or in the early stages of recovery. And often it's with substance use disorder, irregardless of what the substance is. Sometimes there are also sort of other addictions or dysfunctions that come along with that, whether it's around sex or food or money. But often it starts with the substances, and we sort of go from there. So women who are, in the early stages of that recovery and maybe struggling and find themselves challenged with relationships.
Right. Okay. Perfect. So tell me why you are involved, in this area of relationship and dating coaching.
So I found, that there were just so many women around me who were really, really struggling with relationships and found themselves having a hard time maintaining their recovery around substances and, some of these other things that we talked about because of relationships, that they were relapsing when something came up in a relationship, because it's just so terribly challenging to emotionally regulate. Because part of what we're doing when we're using drugs or alcohol is we're regulating our nervous system. And until or unless we develop these new skills, really, really solid skills, it's so crazy making. And, we go nuts and we feel like we're 13 again. When something like that comes up, and the way that we used to deal with that was by using drugs and alcohol. And when we don't have that anymore, and it's like we're still getting our sea legs in recovery, it can be just very, very challenging. And for me, the first time I fell in love, I was 14 years old. I read a book called Women Who Love Too Much. I knew I was one of them, but I didn't know what to do about it. So I drank, right? And, my story goes on from there. Cut to many years later, I finally entered into formal recovery and gave up all of the drugs and alcohol. And guess what? I was right back there, just like I was 14 again. And it was such a struggle because I just never developed the skills, because the skill I was using was drinking and using drugs. And I was very good at that, but I wasn't so good at healthy communication and, how to handle these things, how to regulate my emotions, how to show up in an authentic way. I just didn't know how to do that. And so I want to be the coach that I wish I had had back then.
So it sounds to me, it's almost like you're starting again, aren't you? From that, like you were saying, sort of 14 years old. And that sounds really scary for me to suddenly find myself dating grown-up men, mature men, when I'm feeling like I'm 14, with the skills of a 40. Is that what you're saying it's like?
Yeah, very much so, because there's this thing called arrested development where, developmentally, we're not really progressing because of what happens when we're drinking and using. We're just not socially, progressing in the way that a person is when they're not drinking and using. And so, yeah, it's just incredibly vulnerable.
God, it sounds it, yeah. And so what are the particular challenges? kind of a sober woman is gonna experience.
I'm so glad you asked that. Yeah, because it is very specific and very different. I feel like, a woman who's in early recovery, goes out on a date and her date offers her a glass of wine. And she's like, what do I say? What do I do? Does she reveal that she's in recovery or not? When is it appropriate to reveal that? How does she say no in a way that she can feel comfortable with? Because oftentimes we're not used to setting boundaries either. We're not used to being in our power. And oftentimes, it's so soon to be able to really say, yeah, no, I don't drink. Right. And not wanting to offend the other person, or to have the conversation be all about that. Right. And so giving a woman the skills to be able to say, no, thanks. And to understand no explanation needed, right? Just no thanks. Most of the time, people aren't going to push you on that. And if they do, it says a lot about who they are and where they're at with their relationship with alcohol. I think for women in early recovery too, self-esteem is often an issue. And being able to know your worth and rest solid in that, and oftentimes we haven't even dated. We don't know what dating is, right? The history has been like, you hook up with some guy, you sleep over, and then you get married. It's like, well, so how do I do this dating thing? And I feel like to a lot of women in early recovery, we don't really know who we are yet. And so there's this period of sort of getting to know ourselves. And do we even know what we want when it comes to sex, love, and dating? So that's a challenge too, is really being able to explore, who am I? What are my needs? What are my wants? And how do I sort of moderate my reality? Because moderation is the toughest thing for us. Mm-hmm. We're all or nothing kind of people, and so to be in a place where we're suddenly, going on day dates, we're having lunch with a man and it's 2 hours long, and then we go home. Totally new for us, right? Totally out of the blue to be able to do that. And so I feel like that's super, super challenging. And we're used to having that sort of what we call social lubricant of mm-hmm. alcohol. And when that's not there anymore, okay, how do we feel comfortable? How do we get, comfortable in our skin without drugs and alcohol? What have we reconnected with in terms of our interests, when our primary interest before and our primary identity before was party girl, mm-hmm. So what do I share? What do I talk about even on a date when my whole life has been about the drugs and alcohol?
Yeah, it's almost like conscious dating, isn't it?
Yeah.
Being in that moment rather than trying to escape that moment. That's what it sounds like. And that's tough for all of us, but never mind, without that support of like you say, the social lubricant. Tell me more. I was really interested in when you were saying about the whole, do you want to drink? What would you like to drink? And I know for a lot of women, there's often something that feels that it defines them. It could be ill health, it could be having 3 divorces, or all of us have something quite often that we feel defines us, and we want to get it out there straight away. Let's just get, like you were saying, should I say something, and get it out there and find out how the person responds. I need to know now how they respond. And actually, it's the worst thing to do, in my opinion, but I'd love yours, doing it on a straight up and on a first date. It's okay. And it's also for me about it not defining you. We are so much more than that thing. So when you were saying that, it just sounded so super when you just said, no thanks. So how, here's another, I mean, we're going to go into what's the number one thing to never do in dating, but here's it's an opportunity to give them a great help here. What do they do on that? How do they get themselves where because there's one thing saying no thanks, but feeling the no thanks. Have you got a quick tip on how they can say those words in a confident way?
Absolutely. Practice it with your friends. Practice going out in public, going to a restaurant and ordering a mocktail, ordering, whatever it is that's your favorite drink, and kind of have that go-to drink, whatever it is for you. I love these Italian sodas, and they're really, delicious, and they'll bring it to you in a wine glass. So I still get to feel sort of fancy, a lot of people love ginger beer, and many restaurants do have mocktails now. So you can ask for that. But have your sort of go-to drink so you know what it is that you're going to order that's going to feel good for you. That you still get to feel like you're having something special, you're part of the party, right? And you can feel part of in that way. But it's not this like scary moment where you're like, oh, what am I going to order? What am I going to order? And then you end up with, a Coke Zero, and you don't even really like Coca-Cola.
You're almost going back to being 14 again with the Coke Zero, aren't you? Almost. That's what came to mind. Then, that's reinforcing. I'm a 14-year-old on this date with this 50-year-old man.
Yeah, exactly. So, but no, you can have something fancier. You can have a virgin mojito. You can have, a ginger beer on ice. You can have, like I said, the Italian soda in the wine glass. Whatever it is for you that feels, that feels good, that feels like girly and fun and like party, that's your party drink, but alcohol free.
Yeah.
And practicing that with friends, practicing, just going to restaurants and ordering. And I feel like, there will be many opportunities to do that. And when you do it, I feel like too, sometimes, especially the very first couple of dates, bookending a date like that with a friend. And what I mean by bookending is you have oftentimes in recovery, you have friends who are on the same path as you. So you can call one of those friends before you go on the date and say, hey, I've got a date. I'm going out to meet this guy at a restaurant for lunch. And my plan is, I'm going to order a ginger beer. And then you go and you do the date. And then you call your friend afterwards as well and tell her how it went, so that you can kind of process the experience and also have that accountability and support on either end of it.
That sounds like a brilliant advice. So let's get to it. What is the number one thing to never do when you're dating in recovery?
Yeah, and it's super simple. The number one thing to never do when you're dating in recovery is rush. Rushing, I remember, I think it was Eleanor Roosevelt who said, nobody beautiful ever hurries. And such good advice from such a wise woman, right? So let's listen to Eleanor Roosevelt, because in those early stages of recovery, again, we're still figuring out who we are, and that may be hidden from us for a really long time. So how do we know what we want? And if we go out on a date and we just say yes to someone because they've chosen us, then we miss out on a whole lot, because the opportunity is to discover, well, what do I want? Do I like him? Do I want him? Is this a person who can be compatible with me mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically? And it takes time to figure those things out. That's not going to come like this, in a 2-hour date. So we need some time to sort of discover that. But many times we've been in the habit, and addictions are all about habit, right? We've been in some other habits too around sex, love, and dating, which maybe haven't been working so well for us. And so giving ourselves that opportunity to just take our time, because this sort of the people pleasing comes along with the addiction as well. Many times we have trouble with saying yes when we mean no, because we so much want to be liked. And, hiding a little bit. Secrets and lies are very much a part of the disease of addiction. And we don't have to hide anymore. We don't have to hide, behind a facade. We get to really reveal who we really are. And do we really know who that is yet? So taking our time to do the work that we need to do for ourselves so that we can actually enter into a relationship on a totally different plane from anything that we've experienced before. And in that way, we get to have a totally new experience. So it's actually really exciting. The going slow kind of sounds like boring at first, especially when you're an all or nothing kind of person, when you're a party girl, when you have this reputation for being a rebel, which many of us do. And that's how we've sort of identified ourselves. I actually have a friend who wrote a book called Party Girl, right? So much of our identity is tied up in that kind of stuff. But taking this time to just kind of go slow and discover who we are can be really delicious, and we can linger in that and enjoy that. And what about the mystery? This is so attractive. This is, to us and to them. And can we let it linger? Can we, really play with that and be present for that? Like you were talking about, that practicing being present and being available, which is only going to serve us later in a relationship.
What do you mean by don't rush? What would that look like? Are you talking about, how do you slow date?
Yeah, slow dating. I love it.
We've just come up with that now, haven't we? Slow dating, yeah.
Slow dating. I love it. There's a big thing out there about slow sex, but yeah, slow dating. I love it. I love this idea. I feel like a lot of it has to do with just sort of re-educating and learning, like, okay, what does it mean to date? What are you really about? You're there to learn about this other person and learn about yourself in the process and get to experience, what it feels like to actually get to know somebody and be authentic in that, to actually say what you're really feeling, not what you think they want to hear, right? And having those conversations and seeing, do we really connect? Because it's also been said, there's a British journalist named Johann Hari who has this famous TED Talk, which is about the opposite of addiction is not recovery, it's connection. So that connecting, and whatever that looks like for you, okay, do we have some things in common? Can we have a conversation? What happens, when there's a conflict? Am I a woman who wants to be the leader in the relationship, or am I a woman who wants to be cherished and who wants to be taken care of and who wants to be the follower in the relationship? And discovering that about yourself is part of what you get when you do it slowly. And doing it slowly sometimes requires that you actually kind of set some bottom lines for yourself. So the way I work with clients is I work both from the outside in and from the inside out. So working from the outside in means, like I talked about, setting some bottom lines. So maybe, some of those bottom lines could look like, okay, for the first 3 weeks that we're dating, I'll only see a certain guy once a week. Doesn't mean you can't be going on a date every day of the week, but any particular guy you're only seeing once a week, and only day dates, only meeting in public, for example, might be some of those bottom lines and some of that structure that you can set up for yourself so that you kind of have a plan to follow and you're not just flying by the seat of your pants. Because that might be necessary when we're learning a new thing, and I feel like that can give us a sense of safety too, of like, okay, I know what my rules are. That doesn't mean the rules. It means your rules. What's going to work for you based on what you did in the past that didn't work for you, right? So that's the working from the outside in. And then working from the inside out, which is about doing that inner work, whatever that looks like. And there are lots of different ways to do that. I use a process called Ideal Parent Figure Protocol, which is it's a meditation intervention for attachment repair, which is about creating a new internal working model so that you make new positive choices in relationships based on this sort of healthier perspective. But there are lots of different ways to do that. I believe very much in a lot of the somatic approaches. So ecstatic dance or somatic experiencing, EMDR, Tantra, yoga, all of these things are fantastic in terms of that inner recalibration. So that we can come from that place of self-esteem, self-love, self-confidence, and be able to just be present because we've been practicing it. We've been practicing it on our own before we take it out on a date. And I think that can give us that experience as well. It's just so that we can do something different, because the truth is, if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got. You want something different, you have to do something different.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I love this outside in and inside out thing. It's like the outside, the very practical kind of boundaries that you're talking about. Those boundaries of, I'm only going to see a guy once a week, to begin with. I like that because presumably what can happen, especially when you find them really attractive, let's stay out longer, let's stretch it out to dinner, and that presumably is when the temptation to have a drink, that and starting to feel uncomfortable, or that as much as you're loving it, it starts to trigger lots of stuff, doesn't it? So it's being very clear in the beginning with yourself that it's okay to take it really slowly, and just, if this is the right man for you, is not going anywhere. And I think that Rory Ray, amazing Rory Ray, talks about men and Pat Allen, men fall in love in the space. And it's counterintuitive that we think we need them in front of us. We need to be spending time with them so they're not looking elsewhere, or that, and they're only thinking about us. But actually, it's entirely the opposite. Saying to a guy, actually, I'm really busy and it'd be great to see you next Wednesday. That'd feel amazing. There's this lovely anticipation then, isn't there, for him? So it's not just about slowing down for you. It's such a great benefit for a man as well to have that space.
Yeah.
So your slow dating is not a hindrance to a man. It's actually a really beautiful, and it's, I don't work necessarily with women in recovery, but all women, that's the one thing that I will talk to them about, is create that space for them to miss you, to be intrigued by you. You were talking about that before, so it's a really good thing for them as well. But those boundaries, I think, are incredible. And are you slowing down? Where does sex come into this? Are you slowing down for not jumping into bed with them? Is that part of this, or is that not something that concerns you for women in recovery?
No, 100%. 100%. Super, super important. And that may be one of the boundaries too, is, for example, I don't have sex outside of a committed relationship. That might be a bottom line that a woman could set for herself. And that, again, is depending on what has and hasn't worked for her in the past. So it's not necessarily a blanket prescription for all women. It depends on what works for her and what doesn't work for her. So she might have to do some experimentation with that. I recommend for a woman in recovery that she give herself at least a year of solid recovery in her, around her primary dysfunction, whatever that was, whether it was drugs and alcohol or food or sex or whatever it was. Give herself a solid year to just be really, really stable in her own recovery before she goes through that, because that experimentation, while necessary, can be destabilizing. It can, that's going to disrupt the the attachment system and all of this stuff, and it brings up it touches a lot of those old wounds sometimes. And the truth is, for us, many times, part of the way that we connected with people was around doing our drug of choice with them. And so now we're learning how to connect on a completely different level, and doing it all at once can be so overwhelming. So doing it a little bit at a time gives us the opportunity to see, oh, actually, I was able to connect and we had a nice conversation and I didn't have to use alcohol. But it takes time to actually see the evidence of that and then build the confidence around that, so that actually you can trust yourself to take care of yourself, that you've honored some of these boundaries that you've set. And then you build the self-esteem, and you're going to be such a better dater and a better lover, because confidence and generosity as a lover is incredibly attractive, and being able to be in that place where you can bring your whole self. But if you don't know who you are yet, you certainly can't do that.
I just love all of that. Sounds brilliant. And I know we've just got a couple of minutes left. Even what comes to mind for me is, should sober women only date sober people?
It's such an interesting question. I feel like a lot of people either believe that they should only date other sober people, or they should never date other sober people. And part of the reason for that is because a lot of what I work with is attachment, because I believe this is what's underlying addiction many times. And attachment is basically something that happens on a continuum of anxiety and avoidance. So in the early years of life, usually in the first 2 years of life, every human being models on one of their parents their attachment system, which is about how they connect, how they love, how they attach to people. And so they develop this sort of internal working model based on that. And 50% of the people in the world in general are securely attached, which means, they can seek connection. They're able to show up and communicate and connect with other people. 50% of the people in general in the world are insecurely attached. And so they have, on that continuum of anxiety and avoidance, either high anxiety, and these are people who are anxiously attached, or high avoidance. These are people who are avoidantly attached, or high anxiety and high avoidance. These are people who are called disorganized. And 70% of people with addiction are disorganized. So high anxiety and high avoidance, which means they have the fear of engulfment. That's on the avoidance side of, they're afraid of losing themselves in the relationship. They need a lot of space, and they're oftentimes pushing people away and seeking intensity outside of a relationship. And the person who's anxiously attached has a primary fear of abandonment. So they're very needy, very clingy, constantly needing reassurance, often jealous, and just really, a lot of fear. And when you've got both of those things going on, many times when you've got two people who both struggle with that, and who are both disorganized, which is common if they're both in recovery from addiction, you've got this sort of come here, go away thing going on. And it can be incredibly chaotic and crazy making. And how do we get our footing? And how do we create a secure attachment for ourselves? So I feel like when it comes to dating other people in recovery, again, we need to be sure that our connection with that person is a fact and not wishful thinking. that it is, really based on our compatibility spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, and that we've taken the time to look at all of these things, because it can be also incredibly just rewarding to be in a relationship with someone else who's in recovery, because we have this huge thing in common. It's our life purpose, and just like people who share a religion, this can be a huge common point where we connect and we have a similar belief system, similar values, and all of that, and similar experiences. So it's a great way to bond with people, but that can't supersede all of these other important ideas and ways of connecting as well. So I think it's worth examining. And the truth is, you can date someone in recovery or not in recovery. What's important is that you find someone who you can get through anything, no matter what.
Yeah.
Bottom line.
And if you're applying the number one thing to never do, this go slow dating, then it's not going to matter, is it? It's
No.
not actually going to matter whether they're in recovery or not, because if they're in recovery and they get the slow dating, then if they don't get that slow dating and they're putting pressure on, then they're not the right, they're not going to be right.
Yeah.
Let them go with love. And you could have the same situation with somebody that isn't in recovery, who is trying to push you into going faster than you want to go. Then let them go with love. And I love the idea when you said about having, only dating somebody once a week, but you can go on 6 other dates that week. I'm a great passionate believer in dating lots of people, to get that experience, that self-awareness, and all of that stuff that you talked about. So yeah. Dufflyn, that was fantastic. We could talk for ages, forever on this. How can people get in touch with you and work with you and find out more? Tell us. I'll put all the details below this video as well, but how can they talk to you?
Yeah, I'm very easy to find. I'm like Rumpelstiltskin. If you can spell my name, you can find me. So it's Dufflyn. My website is just Dufflyn.com. I'm also on Instagram at Dufflyn, so I'm very easy to find there. And there is on my website, there's a way to book a free discovery call if someone is interested and they want to work with me, where I spend 30 minutes just kind of talking to you about where you're at and what's available and whether or not it might be a good fit for you.
Okay, so you can explore all this slow dating with them.
Yes, hopefully. Like you, it's my passion. I love talking about it all day.
Well, I'll pop all those details below the video, and subscribe, and then you'll get to see more stuff coming out. So thank you so much, Dufflyn. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks so much, Michelle. I always love chatting with you.